All right, let's do it live on a Tuesday edition of Cleveland Browns Daily. I am merely Beau. He is the great Z. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Not excited for the midweek weather that's coming our way, but I made sure I got out there and got a little knock the small ball around yesterday, hit it well. So happy that I was able to get that in before the blizzard of April 2021. But other than that, I'm doing well. I'm excited. I'm getting ready for this draft. I've started to do like a lot of research on these guys for various. I got to do the Road to the Draft series that we're doing here with the Browns, a bunch of videos. So I feel pretty dialed in. I'm just ready for it. I'm over all of the let's just find out who gets drafted where.
It's all right. On the weather, what I would say is, this is my advice to Ohioans in general. Do not let tomorrow defeat you. No. Do not let it defeat you, because it will be done by next week at this time. It will be in the 70s. It'll be sunny. Do not let this undo the good that was March, it was a transcendent March. Let's not let that be marred by what will happen in the next 24 to 48 hours. This will come. It will go. My recommendation to you is to be busy. I would be busy tomorrow. I'd find things to do to take your mind off of it. Don't let idle time seep in. Don't let the depression of try to stay busy. Try to stay focused. That would be my advice to you tomorrow, because these are dicey times right here. These are the days where you've had enough. It's been going on long enough. It's been crummy for a while. That's it. But don't let that derail what was an incredible 6 weeks through March and the early part of April. Don't let it undo all the good that was done here.
It's
about culture.
We'll
get weather culture here.
We'll get through it. It's just tough coming back
from
the sun, and then they're like, yeah, it's going to snow within a week.
Sure.
Back. What do you mean?
Of course.
Why?
That's right. Yeah, it's ridiculous. How long should an amateur terrible golfer go between buying a new set of clubs? How long does technology get to the point where you go, you know what, you probably need some better technology?
I'd say probably every on a long end, probably every 5 years. On a shorter end, you can probably do, every 2 to 3, depending on when they take a real leap in technology. Yeah. It's more important with woods than irons. I think irons, there certainly are advances in technology with irons, but irons are much more about your feel and your confidence with them. If you feel good about your irons and your wedges, stick with them. I've kept my Mizunos. I've had these for a while now. I love them. And there might be some better, but I'm a very good iron player, so I don't care. The driver is where if the technology advancements in the driver and the shaft are really what matters the most. I'm sure there's some with putters too, but putters feel, again, that's a personal thing. You got guys who putt with the old Billy Baru.
That's feel, very much, yeah. Right, that's right. Yeah, all right. I'm going to have to sharpen the pencil on the monthly budget here to find a way to shoehorn something in.
How far behind are we? What's your driver right
now? It's a Ping. It's blue and black. It's maybe a G. I don't even know what it is.
All right, so that's what Simsy had actually. He had the same one. That you're definitely over the 5-year mark, I think, with that one. I'm pretty sure. Give a look to the TaylorMades and the Callaways. I think TaylorMades make the best drivers.
I'm going to say, here it is. This is it. It's a Ping G
20, maybe.
Yeah, it's blue. It's blue and black. Yeah. It's probably been a while.
It's been a while.
I would say.
I'd
say it's at least 6
years
years
are very
old.
Nice. The new ones for a Sim Max for you would probably be good. That's just the most kind of just trying to help you hit it straight driver out there.
That's what I need. That's exactly what I need. Is help to hit it straight. This is what I need.
Yeah. So then that would be a good one for you to check out.
So it's time.
Yeah, it's time.
All right.
I could go with my driver, but I
We'll
upgraded the shaft and kept because I like the I think I'm on the M2 or M5. I don't know. I'm one of those, but I'm not in the Sims yet. There's been 2 iterations of the Sims that I have not participated in.
Okay. All right. Well, these are things that we got to get done if we're going to try to find a couple of 5 or 6 times to play this summer. I think I definitely need a whole new set. That's
let's
probably
go.
I probably deserve that.
You do
probably deserve that a little bit, my friend.
believe
That's what I think. That's what I think. You mentioned the draft. I'll be very candid with you. I'm fatigued.
Over it.
I'm very fatigued, and I'm just really over it. And it's so, it ends up being a repeated conversation around that we're having, and one that's being had amongst fans, to us, even just talking to folks out and about. It's so difficult, and we've been in this position in a very, very long time, but it's so difficult when you have no idea what's happening in 25 picks ahead of you.
Right.
It's what's going to happen in the first 4, but the other 25 picks in the draft, 24 picks in the draft, could go any number of ways, and you'd have to react to it. Now, I don't want to be misconstrued. That does not mean that this draft will not be incredibly exciting. In fact, it will. I actually think I'm more excited for it than last year, because last year I knew we were taking a left tackle. I knew it. So it was like,
right.
Which one's going to fall?
Right.
This year, it's so nebulous. It could go any number of ways. And until you see what happens in front of you, it's impossible. We are throwing darts at a wall at this point. Yeah,
yep.
We have some scores and we have some things that fit traits. We had the guest on last week that was really smart in terms of the profile of picks that Andrew Berry takes.
Yep.
But in terms of what will be there, it's impossible. There's a mock today that has Kwity Paye falling to us at 26. Okay, well maybe if he falls, but I mean there's 20 ifs between that and when we pick.
So many ifs, and Kwity Paye, by the way, doesn't check any of the boxes, according to Ryan McChrystal, that we want for a defensive end. He's 0 for 3 on those.
Other than the Michigan part of it, pedigree, but other than that.
The box checking. But, right, it's so many different scenarios, and we feel like we have a pretty good lean on where they will go. My question is, do the Browns think this elite cornerback draft is 4 deep? Is it 5 deep? And what would they do if all of them were gone by the time they picked at 26? That, to me, is the biggest one. This is my belief, and I will not be swayed between now and the draft unless somebody tells me definitively that I'm incorrect. I believe we would like to, in ideal world, take a corner with our first pick, but other than that,
yeah.
If the guys that we want aren't there, would we trade up? I don't know. If the guys that we want are all gone by then, are we trading down? Maybe. I don't know kind of where we go. That seems to me to be the one real need we have left. Again, I mentioned if Zaven Collins, if they think he can play linebacker but also do enough rushing the passer that he's kind of a tweener, sure. I would be at this point, and I still see a lot of it. I'm seeing a lot of defensive end to us in the first round. I don't see that. I think that could happen, day 2, sure. I think that you're still looking long-term there, sure. But maybe it is. Maybe that's and you're loading up and you're going to put all 4 of them on the field together. You put them with Tack and Miles and Clowney and just get after it. I don't know. Barmore, I don't think we let Sheldon Richardson go because we then want to use a first-round pick on a defensive tackle. As good as he may be, I don't see that either. But again, flying blind. This is just Nathan Zegura talking.
Yeah.
These aren't scores. That's just how I feel about the way that this draft is going to go. And I think the Browns feel pretty good with the addition of Clowney about, what they have at defensive tackle already. But maybe they think Barmore's the guy.
I would agree. And you never know.
I don't know.
And you could get other people there. There's guys who have been cut who could come in at a reduced rate. You could have Sheldon come back here. The Raiders cut Hurst last week too. Like you could have. Who knows what's going to happen by the time we get to the end of next month, by the time you get to August. There's a lot of options here. It's just that so many things have to happen between the start of the draft and by the time you pick, and you really have to let it fall to you. I would be surprised if Andrew Berry chased the draft. I don't think that's in his DNA. I think the biggest question in this draft for us, and you and I are on the exact same page as we would be on this front, is the corner situation. What we don't know is how do they view the difference in what seems to be the consensus top 4 corners and the next guys.
Yep.
There's 4 guys who seem to separate, and then it's the Asante Samuel and those guys who are in that next group. So how big of a difference do they think there is between Caleb Farley and Asante Samuel Jr., for example? I don't know that. They may view him as the same. They may like Asante Samuel Jr. better.
Sure.
We don't know that. They may feel that those 4 are so separated that the corner you get at the back end of the second round is just as good as the one you'll get at the first end of the second round. Could be.
Yep.
We don't know that. So that, to me, will be something that will, once the draft starts happening, you'll see some of those trends. And if any sort of rush, on offensive linemen, quarterbacks, any sort of push there, why I think all of those things benefit you going into it. But it's just such a blank slate. It's so hard to pin down any real thoughts on it. But that's kind of where you stand as we get into the OBN Hot Topics. Ohio Business Machine, for a copy provided of your Cleveland Browns of all the X's and O's for your office. Call 216-485-2000 or visit ohiobusinessmachines.com. Gibby wants us to play a game. NFL GM, 3 big questions. If you are picking late in round 1 and all 3 days, best available, draft for need. If you go defense, are you only looking at guys that play in a similar system, or do you take a chance? Do you draft for this year or draft with an eye towards the future? Where is the happy medium there? So I believe this. Sure, corner, absolutely. Beyond that, though, best available. If we view those 4 corners, let's say we view those 4 corners. Let me just put this to you, Z. Let's say we view those 4 corners the way that everybody else does. That there's those 4 and then there's a gap between the next group. If that is the case, and let's just say hypothetically, JOK is there, and he has elite traits. And you say, do we need this? No, but, man, he might have a little Palomala in him.
And you're saying the corners are
then
gone?
They would take him.
Sure. If the corners are gone.
Take them.
And that's what the direction they want to go. Sure, it could end up being a JOK. It could be a receiver that they love. It could be Barmore in that case because he could be an instant starter. It could be Zaven Collins if they think he has something elite to offer. I think everything's on the table at that point, within reason. But I think it is. And the question is, best available or draft for need. Ideally, you want that to intersect, and I think you have the potential for that to intersect. But if it doesn't, then you either move around or you just say, this is the best guy for my football team, and I'm going to bring him in, and he's going to improve our roster and our overall makeup. And, you want it to be, I think, obviously an impactful position. If, for example, if the Browns thought that Barmore can be an elite interior disruptor as a pass rusher, that changes the discussion on him. He's not just a run-stopping defensive tackle. And there are some people that think he can. But if he were really regarded as that much of a disruptive interior pass rusher, that's the kind of guy that goes in the top 15, for sure.
Yep.
And that's not the discussion around him right now.
Right.
So, no, I think you're looking at that point, you're saying, you're looking for traits. And if it ends up being an edge rusher at the end of the first round, I think it's going to be strictly a trait-based edge rusher. Somebody that they say, okay, we're going to get him in our system. We're going to coach him up. It's the best ball of clay at that point. We have a great coaching staff.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's get the best ball of clay in here who has the highest possible upside and see if we can't get that out of him, because we're at the end of the first round. And, there are only a few positions where in the end of the first round at 26 that we would take that would be even considered potentially a day one starter. Now, ironically, it could be on the interior of the defensive line. It could be at linebacker. It could be at cornerback. But where else are you drafting a day one starter? You're not doing it at safety.
Really, only at corner.
Really, only at corner.
It's only.
I mean, if you drafted Barmore, you could say that he's going to compete to be your day one starter. But
same would be true if you drafted a linebacker, I suppose.
But that's
you'd
it.
be drafting a guy who would.
That's
it. There's no place else. I think, look, understand this, folks, as you're going through this and trying to mock guys in at 26 and all of that. Let's just take a look at, and we have one draft to go on from Andrew Berry. But if you look even at the acquisitions that we've made, what do we want? We want a high athletic profile. So what do I mean by that? Many of the guys that we've acquired or drafted in the last couple of years have been guys who were like 5-star Porter Gustin, guys who were identified at a young age as 5-star, 4-star, elite athletic traits. Go look at the draft last year, right? Go look at that. There's not a whole lot of developmental. A lot of them are guys who have been known commodities for a long time. Number two, we like big-time programs.
Yep.
If you played at a big-time program, especially the Southeastern Conference, we like you. We like the fact that you've been in the fire. Is that different in a Cobra Deer? Could be. Don't know. But that's something that the track record certainly would be. What else do we want? We want big-time production. Why do you love Jacob Phillips? He led the SEC in tackles.
Yep.
Why'd you like Harrison Bryant? He was the Mackey Award winner. Production.
Yep.
Matters. These things matter. Those things all check the boxes of what we want in the draft. So you start to look at that and match up guys that fit those profiles. Did I miss one? Is there anything else that you would add to that list?
No.
Of things that fit the trade of Andrew Berry? It's pretty straightforward.
I think you're right about that, and it's guys who you mentioned, production, achievement, pedigree,
yep.
right? And then guys who have played in I'd say more often than not, you want guys in the Power 5 conferences unless they have incredible production outside of it. And that's so far, that's what we've seen thus far. And, one of the things I've gone through is kind of projected out our first 4 picks. And there's obviously always some wishful thinking because you don't know who's going to be there in the second round. It's hard to say, will they be there at 89 in the third? Stuff like that. But, yeah, I think that those are pretty good guardrails that guide a lot of the decision-making process and what they are looking for on draft day. I think there are always the potential for outliers, but for the majority of the guys, that's what you're going to be doing. That's what you're going to be looking at. And you think about, last year, you've got Alabama, you've got LSU, you've got Missouri, all, big-time schools and big-time conferences. And
Washington.
Well, yeah, and I think that's the same type of thing you're looking for, whether it be a Newsome out of Northwestern, whether it be an Elijah Molden out of Washington who has produced at a high level, whether that ends up being, one of the receivers from either the SEC or the ACC or the Big Ten. There's so many.
Bateman, Moore, yeah.
Sure. Diami Brown. That's a guy that I'm starting to like a little bit out of North Carolina, who can a field stretcher in the mold of Stephon Diggs and who had a lot of success with, the Minnesota Vikings and Kevin Stefanski. So I think this is a draft where there are a lot of options and a lot of guys that fit that bill. The wild card is how do you deal with opt-out guys? How do you deal with, the medicals, even though they've gotten them back? And, for example, a guy like Farley got a green light, but how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the risk-reward of a Jalen Phillips who at one point retired from his collegiate career due to concussions, then came back and was great, and some people say he's the most talented defensive end in this class?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And if you're looking for one further cheat code, go look at the PFF rankings because we're usually pretty in line with them when you think about the way that we view players and the way they view players. There's some similarities there. There's no absolutes in all of this. But if you're trying to get to who would we be interested in, those are some parameters that I think you can probably take a look in and get to where you're going to go and where you think Andrew Berry's going to get to go. We got a lot on this today. Ryan Wilson will join us at the bottom of the hour, CBS NFL Draft Analyst. We will go around the league coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. This year, start your spring cleaning with the pros. A perfect power wash. Dirt, mold, algae accumulate on your home. They lead to costly damages. Perfect Power Wash is safe process. Professional technicians help remove these harmful contaminants. Keep your house, concrete, deck, patio looking beautiful and protected. This spring, do your home a favor. Leave the power washing to the pros. With 20 years of experience, over 100,000 satisfied customers, you know you are in great hands. Don't wait. Spots on the schedule are filling up fast. Call Perfect Power Wash today using the promo code BOW. Save 10% on all services. I did get a chuckle out of this. Mike Tannenbaum, that they're not all on the same page in San Francisco. They're not unanimous in terms of who they're picking. The Brain Trust is something I've seen thrown around. The Brain Trust hasn't decided. And I don't know Kyle like you do. I just find that to be nonsense. My guess is
I don't believe it at all.
Mike, not for a second. My guess is the Brain Trust in San Francisco consists of him and Lynch. The end. That's it. Maybe ownership. That's it. Nobody else is involved in that, and he's known from the day he traded up who he wanted. That's my hunch.
I believe the last part of what you said is they didn't make this move without a target in mind. That once they decided to get to that point, they knew who they wanted to draft. I agree with that 100%. And I think the Brain Trust is Kyle, it's Lynch, and then if you were to go beyond that at all on the offensive side of the ball, I think Mike McDaniel would be involved, who's been with him when he was here. He's been kind of his other right-hand man on the offensive side. Right, it was he and LaFleur who went with Robert Saleh to the Jets, but McDaniel stayed with Kyle. And so I think that's who it would be. It would be those three, and I imagine when you're talking offensive football, it's going to be McDaniel and it's going to be Kyle, and Kyle is – the buck's going to stop there, and I'm pretty sure Kyle is the one who they knew. You don't make that trade unless you know who you want. And so they went and they knew what they wanted, because otherwise what you're saying is nobody has given me the conviction to make that trade at this point. Let's trade it, but we're not sure who we really like. No.
Any one of these guys, by the way, the notion that any one of these guys could work and they're all entirely different, they're not all the same. They all have different traits. Yeah. Very different. So they're not the same player. So this is not like he's trading up and there's three guys who kind of are all similar players with similar traits. They're not that at all. So there's one who checks the boxes they want. They are very confident that Robert Saleh and the Jets are going to take who they're going to take. And they knew that the guy that they wanted would be there at 3. That's the only reason you do this deal. You're not going around thinking, hey, boy, let's think about how Mac Jones would work on our offense or Justin Fields would work on our offense. No. You do that before you make the trade.
Yes.
That's done. That homework's done.
Couldn't agree more.
And it's a big one for him. Because if he blows this one, it is fireable. It really is, because if you're talking about the Garoppolo deal, you're now going to get out of that. He was your guy. You're out of that. If you don't hit on this quarterback, it becomes close to a fireable offense, if not a fireable offense, if you blow this pick. So he's got to get it right, and the buck will stop with him.
For sure, and that's just the way that I'm sure he wants it, and that's his expectation of it as well. I think that the notion that they are undecided to me is almost comical. And the notion that, I would just be stunned, again, if it's Mac Jones. But we're going to have a guy on the bottom of the hour, Ryan Wilson, who does the draft for CBS, who has Mac Jones on his big board ahead of both Justin Fields and Trey Lance. So we can ask him about that. Why do you believe that? So maybe it's possible that's their evaluation as well. Me personally, I would be surprised by that.
Yes, I would be as well. And any sort of our draft room doesn't know what we're doing. The only reason the draft room in San Francisco doesn't know what they're doing is because Kyle hasn't told them.
Because they don't want to know.
That's the only reason.
Right, they don't need to know.
That's right. They don't need to know.
You don't need to know.
You work on the rest of it. I'll handle this. It's his future on the line with it. He's vouching for it. It's his pick. So there's nobody else who needs to really be consulted on it, quite frankly, at that point. And so it's been such a long process with that number 3 pick, and all of the interest is at that pick, and it's just gotten to the point where it's just gotten silly. Ryan Wilson will join us coming up next. He's a CBS Sports NFL Draft analyst. He has us going defensive tackle, linebacker, first and second round. Tough for me to see that being the way that we go, but we'll ask him why he thinks it will be. That's coming up next. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Injuries during childbirth require experienced counsel. Call the lawyers at Elk & Elk for a clear answer as to what happened during your child's birth. Elk & Elk a proud partner of your Cleveland Browns. Call 1-800-ELK-OHIO today. Time to head out on the hotline. Visit with Ryan Wilson, CBS Sports NFL Draft Analyst. Ryan, you did a 7-round mock, which is, I just appreciate the ambition on that. You got a big board of 150 as well that dropped. Before we get to all of that, though, I wanted to ask you your process of rating these players. Do you have a formula that you follow, and then do you just apply that to the draft, or do you try to get into the head of the GMs, the individual franchises, as you do a 7-round draft?
Yeah, so that's the trick, and that's something that I sort of battle with, because at the end of the day, you want to be right, but you may not be right over the course of draft weekend, because you might like a player at 15 and he ends up going at 45, but 3 years later, it turns out that he was maybe the 15th overall talent. So that's sort of what you struggle with, and at this point in the process, it's a matter of what I think will happen, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, and then also talking to people around the league who have a better sense of what's going on inside the league, because, you guys know this as well. You get into the social media/fan bubble, and you can sometimes be going in a direction that the NFL teams aren't necessarily going in when it comes to player evaluation. So it's a balance. Early on in the process, because CBS has me doing mock draft, starting with the beginning of college football season, which is insane, and that's exactly how it sounds as well. But September, October, November, you're watching guys play over the weekend and sort of rating your mock drafts based on guys that are standing out. The Joe Burrows that come out of nowhere, the Mac Jones that sort of come out of nowhere. But once you get into pre-draft season, the Combine, Senior Bowl, and now we're down the home stretch here, you're sort of talking to people and trying to get inside the head of the GM and the coach in terms of what they're looking for as we get here towards the actual draft.
So, Ryan, in addition to your 7-round mock, you've got your big board is out as well. And I think everybody is kind of under the impression the draft starts at pick number 3. And I noticed on your big board, you do have Mac Jones ahead of Fields and Trey Lance. How did you come to that conclusion, and do you think that's going to be ultimately the way that the 49ers go as well?
That's the question, right? What is going to happen at 3? And here's the thing. So here's why I have Mac Jones. He's rated. It is so close between him and Justin Fields. I have him at 11 and 12. And here's the deal with Mac Jones. So I was watching him like everyone else was, and impressed with how he's doing in Alabama. And late in the process, around December, I was just talking to folks I know in the league and getting a feel for all the quarterbacks, all the top 5 guys we've been talking about for months now. And I said, I think Mac Jones is pretty good. Like I like him. I like him more than most people, I think. And the response I got back in December, January, was that we think Mac Jones is going to be a top 10 pick. So I started talking about it on CBS Sports HQ and writing about it on these weekly mock drafts. And fans and even some media folks, they thought I was crazy. And I get that, because he doesn't look like these quarterbacks that are coming out these days. These athletic marvels, the Josh Allens, the Trevor Lawrences, the Justin Fields, certainly. So I like Mac Jones more than most people, but in the media. But it feels like the NFL has been on Mac Jones for a while. So that's why I like him a little more. Now, I've tried to figure out, you won't believe this, but no one wants to talk about what the 49ers are doing when I call around in terms of where they're going, because they don't know. And the feeling I've talked to scouts that think it's going to be Justin Fields. I've talked to scouts that think it's going to be Mac Jones. I know some teams think it's going to be Mac Jones, but I have no real sense. And that's frustrating on the one hand, because, this is sort of my job. But on the other hand, I'm looking forward to that excitement once we get there on Thursday and the 49ers are on the clock, what exactly they're going to do. Because 49ers fans desperately want Mac Jones or Trey Lance, and then you could go about 10 or 15 names, and then the 16th name would be Mac Jones. Like they do not want, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. They don't want Mac Jones. But Kyle Shanahan has a pretty good track record of working with guys who weren't incredibly athletic, and Matt Ryan comes to mind in terms of that MVP season. They should have won a Super Bowl. But maybe Kyle Shanahan also wants to take the next evolutionary step in terms of what he can do with his quarterback, and that would be Justin Fields first for me, and then Trey Lance, who just had some questions because he hasn't played a lot of football. But I like Mac Jones at 3. I think he makes a ton of sense. I think he's the most NFL-ready quarterback ready to go in 2021 after Trevor Lawrence, and we'll see how that plays out. But I will say this, guys. I think that if Mac Jones doesn't go 3, I don't think he gets past 4 or 5 or 6. I think there's a real chance that he's going to be gone inside the top 10 either way.
What would you say are his elite traits? What is it that would make him elite in the National Football League. Because I think we see with Fields, it's that combination, the athleticism, all of that. Lance, they talk about all of his tools, et cetera. But Mac Jones, I've just heard that he's very good, very accurate, all of those things. But is there anything about him that strikes you as special or elite?
He's incredible. Like, he is insanely smart, and I think that feels like sort of a cop-out. It's like saying he has a great personality. I get that. But I think we undervalue that sometimes when we see these incredibly athletic quarterbacks in college doing all these amazing things that we've never seen before. And sometimes that translates, and it translates really well. I mean, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, the Kyler Murrays, and sometimes it's sort of a stuttering stop-and-go process. I think Justin Fields is going to be really good. I think Trey Lance has you talk about the physical tools, has a chance to be really good. I just haven't seen enough of him to really try to project what FCS, 17 starts in FCS looks like at the NFL level a year from now. But I think with Mac Jones, who also only started 17 games, but against some of the best players in college football, and you heard this at the Senior Bowl, too, when you talked to coaches who were there, that is pre-processing before the snap, what he was able to discern, and then what happened after the snap. It wasn't like, okay, this guy's a really smart college quarterback. It was like this guy feels like he's been in the league for 4 or 5 or 6 years in terms of his understanding of what to do and when to do it. His deep ball accuracy is incredibly good. His intermediate ball accuracy is incredibly good. I thought he was better in his final year at Alabama than Tua was over the course of the last 15, 16 games of Tua's career, because we know that was cut short with that hip injury. So some of the things that we probably don't value highly as fans or media, NFL teams may value more, because they have to. I mean, if you're running Kyle Shanahan's offense, for example, he doesn't tolerate mistakes, and we saw the frustration at times with Jimmy Garoppolo, and people try to compare Jimmy G to Mac Jones. I don't think they're even close. I think Mac Jones is much further along than where he is in his mental processing and where to go with the football than certainly Jimmy G was coming out. And even the other issue is that Jimmy Garoppolo can't stay healthy. So I understand why people compare those two and how Justin Fields would be a huge upgrade. I get that physically. But I think that what Mac Jones separates him from everyone else, including Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence, is how incredibly smart he is.
Ryan Wilson, our guest, CBS Sports NFL draft analyst. Before you get to the mock, I want to ask you about the cornerback position, because Nathan and I feel pretty strongly that is really the only position of immediate need on this team is corner, and that would be probably the priority in the first round. It seems that there is a consensus amongst most that the first 4 guys, and then there's a bit of a dip to the next guy, whether it's Asante Samuel Jr. or whomever. Do you see that? Do you see as big of a gap between those first 4 and 5? And do you think there's any chance that one of those first 4 get to us at 26?
So let me ask you, who are your 4? I'll tell you who mine are now. Patrick Surtain is my cornerback 1. It was Caleb Farley until he had the back procedure, and I've talked to teams that are actually sort of worried about that. But I love Caleb Farley, what he put on tape in 2019. Patrick Surtain for me, J.C. Horn is number 2. Then I have Greg Newsome, number 3.
Yep.
Is that who you guys have?
Yeah, and then Farley 4. Yep.
And then Farley 4. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, okay. So I like – so what happens next? That's right. So for me, it's a couple of names to look out for. I like Tyson Campbell, the cornerback out of Georgia, more than most people. He's 6'1". I think he's at 185, ran really well his pro day. He moves like he's a much smaller cornerback. And people talk about his teammate Eric Stokes. He ran a 4.2 something at that. They had that Fort Lauderdale pro day a month or so ago. But I thought that Tyson Campbell was much smoother in terms of his transitions. Eric Stokes was a little stiff for me, but some NFL teams like him more. I get that. So Campbell's a project in that sense, that maybe he goes in the second round. So you have Kelvin Joseph, the cornerback out of Kentucky, LSU transfer, who had a really good season. And sometimes people say, well, what about when he was trying to cover Kyle Pitts and it didn't work out? Well, I can show you 50 cornerbacks that couldn't cover Kyle Pitts. That's no mark on his record. He's a really good cornerback. You mentioned Asante Samuel. I think has first-round talent. He's 5'10", and he's compared himself to Jair Alexander in terms of being undersized, but playing much bigger than that. And I think that's accurate. I love the way he plays, and he could certainly be there, not only be there for the Browns, but I would love him as a fit with the Browns, and that wouldn't be overdrafting him at the bottom of the first round there. So those are the first-round guys I would consider. Kelvin Joseph's probably more of a top-of-the-round 2 guy. Another name I'll mention because I like him a lot more than some folks is Ife Melifonwu out of Syracuse. He's enormous, 6'2". I think he's 215 or something. Again, his brother still is in the league, but he was drafted as a second-round pick a few years ago at UConn as a safety. But Melifonwu, this one, Ife out of Syracuse, is much better, I think, in terms of his movement skills. He had a lot of good games against some really good wide receivers in the ACC. So those are all guys that'll be there first and second round and are certainly options for the Browns.
Yeah, I like that group of corners, and I think that would be the way that they would ideally go. But, I think there's a good chance, as you talked about, that those top four would not be there at pick 26 for the Browns. So then it becomes, where would they go? And obviously you had an answer for that. And what can you tell us about Christian Barmore in terms of his abilities as a pass rusher?
He's really good as a pass rusher. And he's sort of taken the Quinnen Williams route. He's not Quinnen Williams in terms of what we've seen on the field, but in terms of how he's gotten to where he's at right now in the first-round conversation. Because a year ago, he wasn't sure what his role was going to be, and then he parlayed that into a starting role. He had glimpses in 2019 of flashing how special he was, but you could say that about a lot of the 4- and 5-star guys that have part-time duties at Alabama while they're waiting their turn. But he took advantage of his opportunities. Started a little slow in 2020, but then the last 4 or 5 games, and especially in the playoffs, he went off. And that's the thing that you can sort of hang your hat on, the ability to get better as you get more experience, because he's an incredibly young player. But I think right now he's much better against the pass and the run, but that doesn't mean he can't get better in that regard. And so I had him going to the Browns in my latest mock draft, but typically I have had them, sort of to echo what you guys were saying, targeting cornerback, even edge rusher before Jadeveon Clowney signed, and before that even safety was an option before they signed John Jones, who I think is going to be a really good player. I love that. Well, that's one of my favorite free agent signings in the entire league in terms of bargain and what he brings to that secondary. So, but there are any number of directions you can go, and I think it's pretty amazing. And, full disclosure, I'm a Steelers owner. It's pretty amazing where the Browns are now based, compared to where they've been historically since not only returning to Cleveland, but even in recent years before Kevin Stefanski got there and Andrew Berry took over. And this team is legit. This is a really good football team. And, I don't say that lightly. I mean, they beat the Steelers in back-to-back weeks, including the playoffs. They had a chance, a legitimate opportunity to beat the Chiefs, which sounds crazy, but that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And, Chad Henne somehow decided to be really good for 5 or 6 plays. But this organization is going in the right direction. I love the Kevin Stefanski hire, and he proved exactly why he was successful in Minnesota and brought that to Cleveland. And I think the fact that we're talking about, okay, they need to find a cornerback, but, it's not the end of the world if they don't. That's how far this team has come in a pretty short period of time.
Ryan, I've really enjoyed having you on until you mentioned the name of the backup quarterback in Kansas City, and at that point we almost threw you off the air, quite frankly. I mean, to be honest. That was almost a bridge too far, my friend. I want to ask you about wide receiver, because one thing that Nathan and I talk about a lot, and it was obvious in that Kansas City game, and some of this will be solved by the return of Odell Beckham Jr., but there's some future planning that needs to be done too in terms of contracts with our two most illustrious receivers, and that is future planning at receiver. And obviously the Kansas City game was the word was speed. I mean, that was it. They had an ability to blow the top off of the defense, and that's something that we probably did not have on their level. Few do. So we think there is a chance that wide receiver could be something that we would be interested in, maybe even in the first round, and certainly in the second. I would think and it's a really deep receiver draft. When I say to you, give me a guy who could drop and you run to the table and get at 26, or even at 59, that plays that position, that has the trait of watch how fast I go, what names do you think of first?
So 26 is going to be tricky, because I think that the top 3 guys we've all been talking about, Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Waddle, I don't envision a situation where they get pushed down that far. I say that, right, but every year wide receivers do get pushed down. But these guys, to me, feel special, and I think they're gone by that point. So at the bottom of the first round, you might be looking at Terrace Marshall out of LSU. I wouldn't take him in the first round, not because he doesn't have the physical tools. He ran a 4.3 something at his pro day. But I don't know what he is like as a number 1. And if you're taking him in the first round, presumably you want him to be a number 1 at some point, because he was amazing in 2019, but he was also amazing with Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield, and, of course, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. He was a number 3 on that team. So what does he look like when he's the number 1? And it's hard to gauge 2020. He opted out just before the Alabama game, and the quarterback situation wasn't great. So I would look in the second round, and if someone like Rondale Moore is there in the second round, you talk about the Kansas City speed, Rondale Moore has Tyreek Hill-type qualities. He's 5'7", so that's the issue as to why he might be there in the 50s. Because if he's 5'9" or 5'10", he's probably going in the first round. He ran a 4.29 and had a 42-inch vertical as someone who's 5'7". And, we can talk about workout warriors, but when he was on the field, there were no answers for him from the opposing defenses. That people always bring up the Ohio State game in 2018. That is a game that you go, oh my God, I can't believe this is a human being doing that to a bunch of 4- and 5-star players on the other side of the ball. Now, the other issue is, other than being 5'7", he's only played 7 games the last 2 years. So there are some durability concerns. But in the second round, that feels like almost stealing, because if you're getting 80%, 75% of Tyreek Hill at that point, I feel like that's a home run. He has return ability, and he's sort of one of the, I don't want to call him a gadget player because it's unfair to him, but you could get him the ball on a swing screen, you get him a ball on a quick slant, and he's doing all the heavy lifting for you. It's not like a Terrace Marshall, who's a huge catch radius guy who's running go routes all day. This guy is incredibly versatile. So that's a name that I want to see exactly where Rondale Moore goes, because I've talked to teams that were really concerned about him being 5'7" as a first-round pick, but you feel much more comfortable about that in the second round, especially as you get towards midway and the latter third of the second round.
What do you think of Dyami Brown out of North Carolina?
I'm laughing because I've talked to several scouts who love him, because I always say, like, I watched 4 of his games and I just didn't get it. I was talking about Melvin Feinberg earlier. Melvin Feinberg shut Dyami Brown down. Asante Samuel Jr. shut Dyami Brown down for the most part, and I get it. He's fast. He's great in terms of running those go routes that we just talked about. His hands are a little iffy sometimes. So yes, scouts love him. Some scouts I've talked to love him. Others like, he's going to be. Is that your flavor of ice cream? Do you want that or not? And some teams aren't going to be crazy about him. So I think this thing I had him going in early in the third round,
right? Which
I wouldn't have taken him that high, but I think he could go in the second round, and he very well may. And he may be one of these guys that ends up being a lot better than what I thought. That's on me. But I think opinions are mixed on him. But there are people that love him, and there are people like me that are like, third round feels about right based on what I saw. But again, the thing is, when we say we think this guy's a second or third round pick, that's just a snapshot in time. He's 21 or 22. 5 years from now, he's going to get better. 2 years from now, he's going to get better. So that's sort of what we have to remember. But, yeah, there are teams that certainly like him. And if he went to the Browns at the bottom of the second round, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that's a great sort of example of filling the need that you guys just talked about that wasn't there during the playoff run.
Yeah, it certainly is. Give me some names in the mid rounds that you like that maybe I think when you look at Andrew Berry drafts, you're looking at high athletic profile, right? So you're talking about guys who are identified young as 4- and 5-star players. Usually it seems like big-time programs is something that he's very, very interested in. And then production. He likes production. You think about Jacob Phillips, a year ago led the SEC in tackles, and we love Jacob Phillips here and what his future can be. Who are some guys that fit kind of that mold that would fit in, down the road at maybe not positions of need, but middle round type draft picks that you could see fall into the Browns that would maybe be a nice fit?
Oh, okay. We've been talking necessarily wide receivers. Just talking about best players available.
Just in general. Yeah. Who do you like that maybe you could be a steal in the middle of the rounds?
Okay, here's a name that actually I like a lot. I keep going back to Syracuse, but Andre Sisco is the safety at Syracuse. He actually tore his ACL back in the fall, so he's probably getting close to being healthy. But he had 13 interceptions, middle of the field guy, high production guy, played the ACC, so against some pretty good talent. And we talked about that they just signed JJ3, so they have that. But you can never have enough depth in the secondary in sort of today's NFL. And if he's there in the third round, that feels he may go a little earlier than that, but third round he could be an option there. Another guy I like a lot, Hunter Long is. I think he had production, but it wasn't huge production because he's a BC. But the offense sort of ran through him as a tight end. And tight end, again, maybe not a huge need, but you could never have when you're doing these 2 and 3 tight end sets, and you can split these guys out. That's an option for someone as probably a third or fourth round pick who will be there and can be reliable, is sure-handed. Not a great blocker, but a lot of these tight ends coming out aren't because they aren't asked to do that. But that's a player certainly that I like. Let's see, who else we got here? Patrick Jones is an interesting guy out of Pitt. Edge rusher. He and Rashad Weaver put up a lot of numbers the last few years at Pitt. The thing with Jones, he's pretty strong, not particularly bendy, but he feels like the height weight guy that you see Cleveland go after. And we know Xavier Clowney is now with Cleveland. He's not a guy that's getting 15 sacks a year. And Patrick Jones can certainly do. He brings that element to it. He again, like I said, he's strong off the edge. He's not particularly bendy, but that's a situational pass rush situation where you don't expect him to play 50, 60 snaps a game. And one other name I'll mention, as I scroll down this list here, that I like a lot, but I want to see where this guy ends up. Ardarius Washington, the safety out of TCU. He's undersized. He's like 5'8", 5'9", but he flies around like Bob Sanders used to. Mm-hmm. And the big issue with Bob Sanders, of course, was durability. Ardarius has never been injured. No huge injuries at TCU. And you watch him play alongside Trevon Moehrig, who has often been sort of linked to the Browns before they signed JJ3. He stands out. He plays in the slot, so he can play there. He can play center field, but he flies around like he weighs 30 pounds more than he does. But the issue is when you're 5'8" or 5'9" at that position, you're probably getting dropped a round or two in terms of your production. Maybe he's a third-round guy that ends up going in the fourth or fifth round. But again, the production's there, the playing against big teams is there, and maybe that's something that'll catch Andrew Berry's eye.
Ryan, this is great stuff. I want to just real quickly jump into the second round. Let's say the Browns are able to get Greg Newsome in the first, and now they're looking for an edge. And I want to ask two things. One, in the second round from those guys in that range, Joe Tryon, Joseph Osai, Basham, people in that range, who do you like? And then the second part is Curtis Weaver was a fifth-round pick a year ago by the Dolphins out of Boise State, has all the records in that conference. He's a Brown now, didn't play last year, be kind of like a rookie coming in. Did you think he was somebody that could maybe make the jump to the NFL and be successful as well?
Yeah, Curtis Weaver is a great example of someone that the media was higher on than NFL teams actually were. And I think Curtis Weaver's issue was he wasn't necessarily that strong at the point of attack. And that's certainly something you can work on. You can certainly get stronger and all those things. So that's actually a great point that he's now on the roster, has had a year in the NFL to get stronger and work on those things. So you're right, he dominated at Boise State.
Ryan, just so you know, in this building, all we hear about is, and Beau, fill in the blank. When I mentioned Curtis Weaver, what's the first thing I always say?
What's that, buddy?
What's the first thing I always say about Curtis Weaver from what people are telling me in the building?
Oh, he's a beast. That he's
transformed
we've got him
body.
turned into be. He's transformed the body. He's Hercules in the building now. Yeah,
yes.
We actually have fun with it on the show, right?
We do.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great news. Yeah, because look, at the end of the day, I want all these guys to have a lot of success. They're young guys and whatever. I get it, but that was the knock on him coming out, even though he had the huge production at Boise. So that's fantastic. Good. I made it, at least I sounded like I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's good too. But Jason Oweh, let's see, who'd you mention? You mentioned. So I don't know if Jason Oweh's going to be like he's freakishly athletic. No sacks last year at Penn State. But I think he's another guy that's going to grow into being really good. You mentioned Boogie Basham. I think NFL teams probably like him more than the media thinks. He could end up slipping into the bottom half of the first round, or maybe even the top half of the second. So a name to look out for. Gregory Rousseau might be a guy that ends up slipping. I know NFL teams aren't as hot on him as they were sort of coming into the season, and perhaps his media is. Jalen Phillips outplayed him when he was at Miami last year, and Rousseau opted out. Ronnie Perkins is a guy that I absolutely love out of Oklahoma.
Yep.
We haven't heard a lot about, but he could be there. If you went to Cleveland as a Steelers fan, I wouldn't be crazy about that, but he would be a great fit. And you mentioned Joe Tryon. I talked to his teammate in Washington, Levi Owens-Enrique, who could be a first-round pick as well. And he said, sort of like Curtis Weaver, that Tryon on his year off got muscled up, and he was bigger than he was when he played. And he's a developmental guy in the sense that he has just played a lot of football, but he has a chance to be special. So I like all those guys. Joseph Osai from Texas could also be there at the bottom of the second round. I would probably take him right around that range. But if they get any of those guys that I mentioned, that's huge. I think that's a gold mine in terms of getting a player that can help you right away rush the quarterback.
Wow.
You can follow him at Ryan Wilson, CBS. This was exceptional. Thank you for your time, Ryan.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, good stuff there. There's your draft meat sandwich, kids.
There it is.
Enjoy.
There it is.
Wash it down. Lots of stuff there. And I liked his approach to it. Didn't always agree with where he had guys slotted necessarily, but that's the beauty of this. It's in the eye of the beholder. We will continue with the mock draft fun. The McShay Kuiper train. Boy, those guys, they'll throw out once a week. We're on a Kuiper McShay mock at this time of year. Go ahead, buddy. You got a quick one?
I was just say real quickly. I'm sure you're not going to agree with this one. This might make S cry. And I was going through the whole time trying to figure out where he had Shaun Wade go. Pick 169 or 159 in the fifth round. 161. I'm sorry, fifth round to the Bills. Shaun Wade. I would go ahead and wet my beak on that in the fourth round, or even the third, maybe.
Well, Shaun Wade would have some traits that would fit and check every box that we talked about.
Yep.
He was exposed he played hurt. Turf toe was the issue. So his production was bad last year. He was exposed in big moments, certainly against Indiana and against Clemson. But he was also trying to play on the outside. And if he's not asked to do that, to me, he is a slot and he's a safety.
Yep.
That's what he is in the league, and he's got the body for it, and he has the athletic profile for it. So, I think I'd be very intrigued by him in the 4th round if that was the way that it went. So much more to come. What?
Chelsea has announced they are pulling out of the Super League, and people are going bananas in England right now.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's
like, I'm talking in the streets. It looks like a Super Bowl parade. Bananas. That's what's happening right now.
It had to be. I mean, there was talk that the domestic leagues over there were going to drop the teams from the domestic leagues. The other thing that's happened here, and there's 3 NFL ownership groups. I'm sorry, not NFL, American ownership groups, and just 2 of the 3 are NFL. The Glazers own Manchester United. Stan Kroenke owns Arsenal, and the John Henry and the Fenway Corporation owns Liverpool. And they are being painted in the most negative light following this. Like, this is as bad a rollout as there's been.
Yeah.
In the history of rollouts. Like a new Coke type rollout. Fail. Yeah, as big as can be. And there was also big news yesterday because Bayern Munich, which certainly is on the level of Man United or Real Madrid or anybody, they're definitely on that level. They said, no, we're good. Paris Saint-Germain said, we're not going. We're not interested. Dortmund as well in Germany said no. So the pushback in England has been absolutely tremendous. So that is a big development if one of those England teams, especially Chelsea, said, yeah, we're good. We're
They're
going to sit
partying in
this out.
the streets.
Yeah. I mean, you have to remember, like, these aren't franchises. These are clubs that were founded in many instances by the working class in these cities. Like, Liverpool's banner is "You'll never walk alone." Okay?
Right.
You'll never walk alone unless we want to play in a Super League, and then you're on your own. So that's a tough sell to those people. I mean, it's a very different thing. You didn't buy a franchise; you bought as a steward of a club. It's a very different dynamic over there. So I'm guessing much more of that will come over the course of the next couple of days and weeks, probably. I'm certain of it. Much more to get to. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, welcome back into Cleveland Browns Daily. Beau Bishop here from my great friends at Northeast Factory Direct. If you're sick and tired of your outdated kitchen, now is the time to upgrade. If you want to do that, there's only one place to go. You got to go see my friends at Northeast Factory Direct. They've got high quality, name brand furniture and hot tubs. You know that. They're about half the price of the fancy retail stores, of course, but at Northeast, they can also get you high-quality cabinets for 60 to 70% less than at the expensive kitchen remodeling stores. And it's easy, so simple. Make an appointment, bring in just some basic measurements, and they're going to walk you through everything. And the best part is the appointment and the design, those are free. That's a pretty remarkable thing right there. Northeast Factory Direct cuts out all the costs associated with traditional stores. You can buy nice stuff at really incredible prices. They also have 0% financing available, guys. That's right, 0% financing. So if you're thinking about remodeling your kitchen, it is simple. Go to northeastfactorydirect.com, schedule your appointment today. All right, Kuiper and McShay with a, and by the way, Orlovsky at the bottom of the hour. Good job out of you, Gibbe. Kuiper and McShay with dueling mocks, alternating mocks, as many mocks as you want. So they alternated picks over 3 rounds, how they thought that this would play off. And the way that I think is the way that they would draft it, not necessarily how the teams would draft it. So at 26, well, first of all, off the top, I guess we should start there. We should start off the top. So they have Fields going number 3. They have Kyle Pitts going 4 to Atlanta, which I think both those things are very, very likely. They have New England moving up to 7 for Mac Jones. So by the time you get to us at 26, the pick is Kwity Paye, the defensive end out of Michigan. It's McShay making the pick. He said it's a mini slide for Paye, my top-ranked edge rusher, but Cleveland isn't complaining. The Browns still need a high-end pass rusher opposite Myles Garrett, even if Jadeveon Clowney and Takk McKinley have been signed. So let's play a game here.
Sure.
If this is the board at 26, would this be your pick?
No. If this were the board at 26, I would pick Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. If I was going for a pass rusher at this point, that's the one that I would take of the guys that are available here still. All of the top corners are gone, so I may even make a trade back out of the first round. But if I were taking an edge, I want Azeez Ojulari. He's the one who checks all the boxes. He's the one that I think is the most dynamic. He was dominant in the SEC, led the conference in sacks, so he's the one that I would get.
Yeah, and I think the thing that you mentioned there is probably the way that it would go, that you would trade back out. It would seem to make the most sense to me to trade back out, maybe pick up another 2, push picks into next year's draft. We know not 9 guys are going to be picked. Nobody believes that. I do like Kwity Paye. The production, he was injured. They didn't know what really to do with him at Michigan. That's such a dysfunctional program at the moment. I like Azeez Ojulari. I know you do as well, as obviously you just mentioned him. The other thing that would be interesting here, Rashad Bateman would be interesting here at receiver. I don't know that we would go first-round receiver. I think you get a really good one in the second. And I am curious about Zaven Collins, but I remember when we had, and he went 30 to the Bills, if they could figure out if he could work, just rushing the passer as well. But I remember having Dane Brugler on it, and wasn't it Dane who said that he was worried with that he's not a hitter, that he's not somebody who's incredibly physical. So that would be the problem. My thinking here would be trade out. If you're sitting here at 26 and these are your options, you would trade out. Yeah,
I agree with that. And again, Ojulari could be your long-term solution. He's a lot like Carl Lawson.
Yeah.
And you would be able to get him and put that in the group and say, let's go. Let's get after the quarterback, and it gives you some succession planning. But my ideal would be a corner that's not there. And so certainly if I started this draft, though, without a corner, I'm probably looking to get one in the second round.
Yeah, for sure. And that's likely the way it would go. We spent a lot of time talking about Christian Barmore in the previous segment. They have him going 44 in their alternate draft all the way down at 44. We've mentioned Jason Oweh a bunch, Joe Tryon. They're mid-40s, 46 and 47 with those two guys. Kelvin Joseph out of Kentucky, the corner, goes 48 to the Raiders. So that gives you an idea about kind of where we're talking. Rondale Moore, who we've talked about a lot, in their mock, goes 52 to the Bears. I would hate that for him. I would absolutely hate that for him if he went there. And for us at 59, the pick is Anthony Schwartz, the wide receiver out of Auburn. Kuiper writes, the speedy Schwartz could be a deep threat for the Browns, who still need depth at receiver. He was used on underneath routes in college, but he has some untapped potential. I will not pretend that I've spent any time studying Anthony Schwartz or have much feeling on what he is as a player.
Agreed. I don't know. That's a name that I am unfamiliar with, but as if you were saying, okay, Nathan, you're here, who would you have picked with the people that are on the board, knowing that we took an edge in the first round? Schwartz would not have been the pick for me. At this point, I would defer, obviously, to the people in our building, but for me, I'd be looking at Aaron Robinson, the corner from UCF. I'd be looking at Elijah Molden, the corner from Washington, who's more of a slot guy, but they like. And then I would also be looking at Melifonwu from Syracuse, who is the bigger, longer guy that we just heard Ryan Wilson talk about. So it would be one of those three for me at this point, since we did not get a corner earlier.
Yeah, I'm with you on those fronts. If you go to their third round pick, and on theirs their 87, it's Shaun Wade to Pittsburgh at 87. Pete Werner out of Ohio. Actually, the Buckeyes go 3 in a row here. Wyatt Davis to the Jets at 86. Shaun Wade 87 to the Steelers. Pete Werner to the Rams at 88. And they have us taking Ernest Jones, the linebacker out of South Carolina. High upside inside linebacker with instincts and long arms. The Browns don't have many immediate needs, so Jones could be eased in. Certainly agree with the part where he talks about the Browns don't have many immediate needs. But I have a hard time thinking a third rounder on an inside linebacker. They do have us taking 2. Ardarius Washington going 91 to us as well, the safety out of TCU.
See, I don't see us doing. I could see a linebacker here as they continue to, Walker's a 1-year guy. We need somebody to play alongside Phillips long term, with Taki potentially developing, et cetera, Malcolm Smith not being here. So I could see that happen in this round. But my guess would be I'm looking for a receiver here. And here's a guy, and you might be more familiar with him than I am, but that could make some sense for the Browns at this point would be Davion Nixon, the defensive tackle out of Iowa, who they say is a perfect 3 technique and a 4-3. And this is where maybe you put another investment in there for a long-term plan, with Malik Jackson being a little long in the tooth, and Billings is here, for 2 years, but that he would be your long-term guy next to Jordan Elliott. So I could see that be a pick somewhere in this area for the Browns, and then maybe one of those receivers. And there's so many of them in this draft that they like. But I think
Nixon makes a lot of sense, and I think that position makes sense in the third round where you got 2 of them. That to me makes a lot of sense to get a tackle there and develop him and find a guy who can get it done at that point, rather than some of these mocks that have seen us going D tackle in the first round. But who knows? These things could go any number of ways. But I think that does make some sense. And Nixon's a really nice player who is at times dominant, certainly, at Iowa, and would make some sense. This is a fun it's a crazy exercise to do, to try to get in the mind of every team in the NFL and alternate picks all the way through. It's why I asked Ryan about it. Like, are you honest to your board, or are you trying to get in the minds of every team in the NFL when you make the picks? Because it's really 2 different things.
Right, and I think that's the challenge that, why this is a difficult exercise. And as soon as one thing's off, by now what you're doing in the third round's irrelevant. So they are fun. They are exercises. I'll be honest with you, I don't love the way that this board fell for the Browns.
I either. I hope it doesn't fall this way. I'm not crazy about it.
Me neither. And that's probably why I would move. I think Ojulari's great. I'd be thrilled to have him be on the Cleveland Browns. And, you are thinking more than just 2021 with that pick, which is fine. I was just shocked here. The receivers that I like, and even some of the corners I like Asante Samuel Jr., they're all gone. Atwell goes 38 to Cincinnati. Diami Brown goes 41, to the Detroit Lions. Campbell goes 43 to the 49ers. These corners, Kelvin Joseph, 48 to the Raiders. Amari Rodgers from Clemson, who's somebody that has been linked to the Browns, one of the better slot receivers in this one. Rondale Moore goes 52. Eric Stokes goes 53. So that's 10 names that I just gave of receivers and corners that you think you might be interested in at that spot, who all just go off the board right before you.
Yeah. Very, very difficult. And hopefully it doesn't go this way, because it's different certainly than what we had hoped for, and some names that frankly you weren't expecting to be there. Let's go around the league here a little bit. The Steelers extend Mike Tomlin 3 more years on that contract. I saw something this morning that if he goes to the end of that contract, he will be 58 years and 3 coaches for the Steelers.
It's wild. That's wild. It's unbelievable continuity. It is. It's tremendous. I mean, we had 4.
It is.
If you count the beginning of the 2018 season through today, we've had 4. If you count interim Greg Williams.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the one thing about them that, and they're in an interesting time as a franchise, as they haven't tanked. They haven't fallen off the map.
Nope.
It hasn't happened in a really long time. You'd have to go back to those late 80s, mid to late 80s to see, that jumps to my head as they were rebuilding post-Steel Curtain, post-Bradshaw, all that. The Bubby Brister era, I don't know how much that bottomed out. I don't remember them ever picking really high. They rarely do. And consistency is part of it. They draft to their system, and that's what we're trying to do here. You're trying to draft to a system. You're trying to stockpile. Much of the things you and I talk about with these mocks, they're all what you're hoping to do is emulate what they've been able to do in Pittsburgh and Baltimore, which is keep continuity, draft for systems. That's how you have real success sustained in the NFL, is not having to draft to different systems all the time. We have one now that we like, and hopefully we'll be able to mimic that process.
Right, and it's incredible, and we know from where the Haslams came from that was for many years the gold standard, and that's what's to be emulated as an organizational stability. Now, there are people, ironically, I don't know if you saw this, but people in Pittsburgh who are not happy about this.
Yeah.
Said he hasn't won a playoff game in 5 years, and
right.
Does he reach it? We started 11-0. We finished 1-5. Has he lost his touch? Is it is he good with great players only? Do his rules is he a coach that makes you better? Or is he a coach that makes your locker room better, but not necessarily schematically and strategically on the field better? It would be nice. It would be nice to think about what a problem that would be to have, right? To have somebody who's been as accomplished as Mike Tomlin to win and now be like, I don't know if he's good anymore. Why did we extend him?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest what ifs in the NFL, or rather probably the better way to put it is one of the biggest missed opportunities in the NFL over the last 2 or 3 decades, is the fact that they had the 3 Bs and really didn't accomplish anything with them at their peak of their powers.
Right.
That they had Bell, Ben, and Brown, and they still had the Steelers' defenses they've always had, and they were that dangerous offensively with a younger, healthier Roethlisberger, and they weren't able, because if you would have go back a decade, you would have said, all right, who is the team to take down New England? You would have said it's going to be Pittsburgh. That's the team. They've got everything that you want. They were incredible on the offensive line. They were young on the offensive line and talented. They had all the skill position players you'd want, franchise quarterback, and it just didn't happen. And that's something that in retrospect is strange that it didn't, because I think most people would have bet on that being, they would have won a Super Bowl with that group, and it didn't happen. That's how hard it is.
Right. It
you
speaks to how difficult, just how difficult it is to get it done, and why you see teams go in, in a 1-year scenario and say, let's go for it, because it's hard to be sustainably good's hard. And when you are close enough that it's legitimate and real, you got to try. That's the whole goal, right? To win one, and you're going to be just fine. You win one, it changes the way that you are regarded in the history books, and the way that the perception of you as a general manager, as a coach, as a player, as an organization. Just win the Super Bowl.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. This is one that speaks to how difficult the job of the NFLPA is and those individual representatives on each team. So this was 7 days ago. The Denver Broncos players said that they would voluntarily skip OTAs next week, that all the players would skip OTAs, and then within the last 20 hours, Broncos quarterback Drew Lock leads 20 players who are going to report to OTAs and are going to do it. And that's why it is so hard, because if you put yourself in Drew Lock's position.
Of course.
If you don't show up, they may draft another quarterback.
Yep.
They may anyway.
Yep.
And you may be out of a job.
Yep.
And the non-guaranteed part of these guys' contracts allows for so little real power. And this is an example of it. The NFLPA wants everybody unified. We're going to be strong. Everyone's going to sit out. And here we are, 3 days into this? And you've got 20 Broncos players saying, yeah, we're going in.
This whole thing, and I I have so many mixed feelings on this whole thing. You had a chance to, when you negotiated the new CBA, if you wanted to get rid of the offseason, that was your time to do it. To now say that it's about COVID is the reason, it's not. I think we all know that. I think that that's what's being stated. It's not. It's not about that. It's about they went through an offseason without it, put on a good product, and now they don't want to do it anymore, the players. And
they added a 17th game. I think that it's a pushback for the 17th game, too.
Sure.
Like, really? Although they collectively bargained.
But that's what I'm saying. That was
game.
All these things were negotiated on, and now they're trying to rewrite the CBA. And the ironic part, it's our good friend and one of our own players, and J.C. Treader, who's leading the charge. I love him too, and he's a smart guy, and he's advocating for his guys, and I respect that. I understand it. But I do think that just trying to get rid of the offseason under these pretenses at this time is not necessarily the best way to go about it.
No. And I think it's going to prove to be very, very difficult. Talking about the Cowboys and their situations and the bonuses tied to showing up, and now you have this in Denver, and I think this will be repeated around the league. It's when you don't have guaranteed money, it's just really hard to represent such an enormous gap in the have and have-nots. It's really hard, and that's why the NFLPA is always in a tough spot and the weakest of the unions that are out there in professional sports in North America. The great Dan Orlovsky will join us next. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. If you live and breathe football, you know sometimes keeping your priorities straight can be a challenge. Unfortunately, the same can be true when you gamble. So if your gambling is affecting parts of your life, get some help, get some tips on responsible gambling at KeepItFunOhio.com. And with that, we head out to the hotline for a visit with our great friend Dan Orlovsky, ESPN NFL analyst, joining us. And a bit of breaking news here on the program, Dan. You're coming to town, pal. NFL Live coming to Cleveland next week. You and the whole gang. Wednesday through Friday, couple hours every single day. You need a place to stay. You need some dinner reservations. What do you need, pal?
All right, couple of things here. First of all, it's really good that I spoke so highly of Baker Mayfield over the past 18 months. So now when I go to Cleveland, I won't have sudden attacks on me in the streets. Also, Marcus Spears did not. So if you want to go and punch him in the face, have at it. I would not recommend doing that because he's huge. But if you wanted to go have some words with him, I would encourage that. I'd love a place, if we can get a really good early morning tea time on Wednesday or Thursday, that'd be awesome. But other than that, no, I'm super excited to get out there. I think our whole crew is really excited to be out there and kind of representing ESPN and having the TV time.
Dan, real quick, is this first on location for you?
This would be my first
since
time
COVID?
in Cleveland. No, we've done on location at the Super Bowl. And
that's right. Okay.
But this will be my first time going to Cleveland in a long time, certainly. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be out there and just feel a little bit of the energy.
It's going to be great. And I think tea time's something we certainly could arrange for you to smack the small ball around, Mr. Orlovsky.
What's the great courses in Cleveland? Is there any really nice courses right inside of Cleveland? Oh, Firestone, right?
Firestone's
a
little
we're not
bit
hard
away,
at courses.
Yeah,
we're not hard at courses. We got some courses.
Yeah,
we'll do well.
We got plenty for you.
Could be wet. Might need to be a mutter, but we can do well with that.
Yeah.
Clean and replace.
Clean and replace. Exactly. Well, this is exciting that you're going to be here, and yeah, certainly we'll get you. Hit us up after the show. I'll hook you up with some golf courses and certainly some food recommendations as well. You're coming to a good town for good eats. Cleveland, very underrated as somebody who has spent time in other parts of the country. I think very underrated from food. So you'll be in good shape here, and you have spoken highly of Baker, and that's why we trust you. That's why we like you. That's why we want to hear your take on this draft. And before we get into the Browns stuff, it feels like it starts at 3. And we're hearing all this Mac Jones stuff. I knew Kyle from his time here. Could I see him winning with Mac Jones? Yeah. I don't necessarily see the fit from the sense that I think Kyle likes traits a lot. But what's your take on these quarterbacks? And what would you do? You're Kyle Shanahan. Who are you taking?
Well, I think, one, I'm never a fit person. I'm always, can the player excel there, given what his talent, skill, and traits are in that certain offensive or defensive scheme. What I have been on Mac Jones to San Francisco for 2 months. I just, the offense that Mac ran, and I think there's two things. I played under Kyle. Two things that Kyle constantly used to talk about when it came to the physical attributes of quarterback play. One, a very natural throwing motion. And then 2, upper body torque when they throw, when their feet are set and they can't step in because the pocket or the collapsing of bodies, because does the quarterback have the ability to have that upper body torque? And there's 2 guys that really have that at the top of this draft, Zach Wilson and Mac Jones. And I do believe that the initial move to go up was, okay, we're going to go get Mac Jones, because I think Mac Jones got the best tape. I think his talent and skills transferred to the next level. I think that he would win a lot of games in San Francisco. Now, what should they do? I think at the end of the day, the question becomes this. Are they looking for a quarterback that is going to execute Kyle's offense at a really high level on a really consistent basis? If that's the answer, then it is going to be Mac Jones. Is Kyle Shanahan, the second question is Kyle Shanahan sick and tired of being the bridesmaid and never the bride? Is he tired of having all these really good play calls and just not being enough? And does he want a quarterback that's going to go above the X's and O's, that probably won't operate the offense as highly consistently as Mac Jones, but he'll do more occasionally? If that's the answer, then it is Justin Fields or Trey Lance.
Interesting.
Dan, it's interesting because I can't recall a draft in the lead up to it that's been the way this one does, where everything is at 3. and Fields has certainly been at the center of it, and you know that all well. How much that has been a topic of conversation,
I do.
Obviously. And we've watched him a lot, having him played at Ohio State, obviously, and I like him a lot. I actually think he's the second best quarterback in this draft, and if I were picking number 2, that'd be the pick there. But what I am curious about from your perspective is the idea that there's no conversation about number 2 with Zach Wilson. I mean, it's the New York market. It's a quarterback. And Lawrence, by the way, a lot of people think he's Andrew Luck, and there's very little conversation about that. It's almost like content has to be manufactured on that front, and all of the interest is on 3, and most of it surrounds Fields. Why do you suppose that is?
I think that the fundamental difference between, let's say, Zach Wilson and Fields, being the 2 conversation is the Jets. I'll give you my perspective. I think the Jets look at Zach Wilson and go, he plays very quick. He plays twitchy. He's very sudden. I think he's got uncoachable traits. I think with Justin Fields, if you're going to go, well, why would he not be in that 2 conversation? I'd say he's deliberate with the football. He's deliberate with, my feet are here, my upper body's here, my eyes are here. I'm throwing the football here, everybody. And that usually doesn't play well in the NFL. Now, I said that about Josh Allen coming out of school, and he's kind of developed that out of his game with good coaching and commitment. So Justin Fields, I would imagine that's something that he can continuously get better at. That would be my on-the-field thought process of why the Jets are likely with Wilson at 2 and not Justin.
Okay.
And I think it seems like that's one of the worst. It's a well-known thing. The draft, as we said, starts at 3, and normally for the Browns, we'd be talking about us somewhere around this area, Dan, and this year, all the way down at 26. Before we get into the draft for the Browns, what do you think just in general of the offseason that Andrew Berry and the Browns have had, bringing in a lot of talent, especially on the defensive side?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that John Johnson, I was actually with John his rookie year when he came out of BC, and I was in camp with the Rams. And immediately, I just remember hearing the guys on the defensive side talk about John and how impressed they were with, how quickly he was picking things up, how well he understood the why of what the defense was. And obviously, it's transitioned to him being a really good player. Troy Hill coming over. It's funny because last year, the defensive secondary was a weakness. It just was. Denzel was, relatively consistent and a good player, but he missed some time, right? But I think he led the NFL in PBUs and whatnot. Greedy missed the whole. So the secondary is a weakness. And this secondary now has the chance to become a strength. It has the chance to be flipped from weakness to strength. If John and Grant Delpit's healthy and Greedy's healthy and Troy settles in, and Denzel, you're looking at 5 really good players in the secondary. And I think that's been the most impressive thing that Andrew Berry's done is really attack the weakness. It's almost like I remember being a kid, and as you get into your athletic career, I used to always hear coaches say, attack your weaknesses, attack your weaknesses, attack your weaknesses. And it's almost like he's attacked the weakness of the football team to try to make it a strength.
Dan, Nathan and I kind of were talking about this in the last month or so, and obviously we view everything through orange and brown colored glasses, but we kind of feel like we have a top 5 or 6 roster in the NFL. Do you have a problem with that
no doubt.
statement?
No doubt. We actually we did a segment the other day on NFL Live, me and Mina Kimes, and the question was, who's the biggest contender to the Chiefs in the AFC? And Mina and I both sat there and said, neither the Bills or the Browns rosters really have flaws. There's just not a lot of flaws in the football team. And that's why you look at those 2 teams as, in my opinion, far and away the best chances to unseat the Chiefs. And so it's a really, really healthy roster where you can now really get into drafting well and getting good players on your football team rather than saying, gosh, we've got a huge hole here. We don't really love this player, but we have to take him. And so, yeah, it's a really good roster.
Dan, it seems, though, if there were one place that you would want to maybe, it's not a need per se, but I think that you'd say we want a little bit more talent and depth there, it's corner. And, what are you kind of hearing about the corners in this draft at 26? We've talked to a lot of people. It seems like there are four, and the four being Surtain, Horn, Farley, and Greg Newsome that have kind of separated themselves into maybe tier one. Is that kind of the way that you're hearing it, the way that you're seeing it as well?
Yeah, I'll only speak on these guys in regards to like the offensive perspective, because I don't want to pretend to be, this defensive back guru, so to speak. And I don't think JC's going to be there. I don't think Patrick's going to be there. Farley might, depending on how people value the medical aspect of it. I called a couple Northwestern games this year. I was always just so impressed with Newsome, because you go call it Northwestern versus Northwestern versus Wisconsin game. You're like, oh man, Wisconsin's got some guys, and then you think Northwestern, and your initial bias is like, oh, they can't be good, and then all of a sudden you cut on the tape and you watch their plays and like, man, this guy is good. And Newsome's just one. He's got great length. I love his length. When you're talking about quarterback play, you're like, man, now I know he's going to be a problem at the line of scrimmage. And then you're talking about, his ability to play zone coverage. And I was always weary of guys that could play off zone coverage, because when they have the ability to kind of get those jumps on you, and if they're good in it and if they're smart and study tape, you always know that there's the opportunity that they get there before the football does. And that was always something that I was cautious about. I think the Kelvin Joseph kid from Kentucky's super intriguing as well. So while I do think corners going to be important for them, I'd say that if they can get a really good linebacker, Zaven Collins, or an edge rusher, I don't know, Rousseau or somebody like that, that would be as equally important.
When you look at and through the offensive lens, this is also an incredibly deep wide receiver class. And this is a Browns team that, while you're set for 2021, you're bringing back everybody. You look to the future. You say there might be some changes that come in. But at the same time, one thing you don't really have here is speed, raw speed, like we see with the Chiefs and we see with some of these explosive offenses. And this is a draft that has a lot of it. Who are some receivers, knowing this scheme the way that you do, that you think might be intriguing options for the Browns, whether it be late round one or even into round two, early round three?
Yeah, the speed guys, I'd say, I don't know if it'll be round one for the Browns, but Elijah Moore is certainly a speed guy. Now he's a little bit more inside. Dwayne Eskridge from Western Michigan is a guy that's got a ton of speed. One of the guys that I love is De'Ami Brown out of North Carolina. Like, I love him. I think he's got electric speed, and that's somebody that can kind of open up a little bit more of the pass game. Anthony Schwartz from Auburn is another speed guy. So, it's always such an interesting conversation, because when you're talking, okay, do we want to take a receiver, so to speak, in maybe like the third round, right? And so where do you value this guy's he's a qualified receiver, but his speed is X, or is it let's go get the speed, and maybe he's not as refined of a wide receiver, so to speak. And so I think that's going to be like the really interesting aspect for some of these receivers. But if you told me the Browns had the chance to get a De'Ami Brown like in the third round, I would love that.
Dan, you mentioned Newsome, and there's been a lot of talk about him to us. And since you called his games, I want to drill back in on that for a second, because one thing that's hard, and as somebody who pays attention to Ohio State a lot, he didn't get a play in that game.
Right.
He's down in that game, so you don't get to see him against Olave, against Garrett Wilson, who most people think will be first-round picks in next year's draft at the receiver position. So from a trait perspective, is that a guy who at 26 you go, Andrew Berry, race there and put the card in? Does he have the boxes checked that you want to, even though you don't have that? Boy, you would have loved to see him against those Ohio State receivers.
Yeah, no, he does. I think Newsome's fantastic. I really do.
Okay.
I think, and this is going to sound very loud, I think he's got a lot of game that is similar and trait that is similar to Richard Sherman. Okay. Again, he is not going to blow your mind with his speed, but off zone coverage or the ability to, at the line of scrimmage, ball gets snapped and I'm going to stab you with one arm and stun you as a receiver. I think those are his two strengths. Like if I'm watching tape as the quarterback, I'm watching that and going, that's going to be an issue. That's an issue. And so I think that's I think those are two big strengths. And another guy that you could put into that conversation with that draft slot would be Asante Samuel Jr.
Okay.
I think he is because a lot of it is what is Joe Woods like real. If his philosophy is going to play off a little bit, then I think Newsome. If he wants to be a little bit attacking, Asante Samuel Jr. from Florida State is a lot like his dad and kind of that gamey Janoris Jenkins type of player.
Very good. Dan, welcome to town next week. Can't wait to have you here. We'll see what we can do on the golf front, get you that early tee time that you want. Hopefully the weather cooperates. Got some beautiful courses we could get you set up on, my friend.
I look forward to it, guys. I appreciate you guys. Are the best.
All right.
All right, that's Dan Orlovsky, good buddy out of ESPN, of course, NFL analyst, former NFL quarterback as well. One of those guys, self-made man in the business, man.
Totally.
Self-made, as self-made as it gets. Hey, watch what I can do on social media. ESPN goes, hey, this guy's good. And now he's, one of the faces of NFL Live and Get Up and everything else. Yeah, no, some people just have it. He's got it. So some really good stuff there. And be interesting. I'm really fascinated that I think that's really cool that he had the Newsome games, because we've talked to a lot of people about Newsome.
Yep.
And about some of these guys. It's one thing to be a draft guru and you're looking at a bunch of players, but when you've called 2 Northwestern games, that means you've looked at a lot of tape just on Northwestern. And you don't view it from the perspective of, how does he compare with other corners? You're just saying, how does he look on defense? What does he look like? And one of the knocks, it's not a knock, but just one of the unfortunate events was he wasn't able to play against Ohio State.
Yeah.
So you didn't get to see him on that level. Now, they did play Ole Miss, but I can't remember if he played in that game or not. I'm not going to act like I paid attention to no, Indiana played. I can't remember who their bowl game was against in Northwestern. I can't remember that. But, the Ohio State game was the one you wanted to see him play in, and you didn't get a chance for that. So that was some good stuff, from Dan on that front. Still so much more to come. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. 2021 NFL Draft is coming to Cleveland April 29th. May 1st, next week, you can be a part of the action at the NFL Draft Experience taking place outside First Energy Stadium. 2021 NFL Draft Experience is a free football celebration open to families and fans of all ages. Space is limited, of course. Reserve your tickets today via the NFL's One Pass. And I do this while, firmly knocking on wood. It looks like the weather could be pretty sweet. I saw some early next week forecasts in the, upper 70s. So that would be really sweet for us to have, a good stretch of weather. Let's get the snow out of the way tomorrow.
Wednesday, 79 and sunny for a little round of golf with Orlovsky.
There you go.
Let's go.
There you go. Get it done. Get it done. Solicit your clubs to Zegura, and he will go over them and see which one is the most impressive to him, and then make that selection. And then you can have Dan Orlovsky out at your club.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Can I just do that? I guess I did.
I think you just. I think you did.
That happened.
Done.
Yeah.
That just happened.
Yeah.
It's done.
That just happened. Yeah, that's done.
That's going to last longer than the Super League.
I don't know. Yesterday, the guy with Real Madrid, Florentino Perez, said it's contractually bound. You're going nowhere.
Man United's out now, too.
Oh, Man United's out now, too?
Yep.
Minute 30.
Wow, their ownership just sent us a letter. Man United or Man City?
Hold on. Hold, please.
Because I heard that City was bouncing.
Oh, Man City. Yeah, Man City. Sorry.
Man City is,
different man.
Man City was
huge. I know. If we were, I'd be thrashed in England right now.
That'd be like guys doing Manchester City, Man City United's Man United hosting Man United Daily, going, hey, you know what? It's the Browns are opting in. Oh, I meant the Steelers.
Right.
One minute.
The Steelers are opting. Oh, same thing. No,
same thing.
not.
Different.
Not.
Wrong.
All right.
Listen, news is coming
Very
fast.
Good. There's a lot happening on this front. I like how usually Paul Brown's our European correspondent, but today you were all over it on the Super League front. So that was a good job out of you.
By the way,
go ahead.
I was just say real quickly, Ed Woodward has now resigned as the chairman of Man U after backlash over the European Soccer League. This is now coming. It's going crazy.
I wonder if they'll make him be the scapegoat. The Glazers will make him be the fall guy on
Jeez.
it. Could be. Coming fast, boys. Next level coming up next. You listen to